Welcome to the television edition of Radio Friends, where we feature guests from all over central Missouri. Today, we've got some beautiful music with Maria and Kirk Trevor, and we'll talk about pet health tips with Mar Doring. All that and a lot more. So let's get started right now. Good to have you here, Danielle. This is the first time you've been on our program.
It is the first time, and thank you for having me.
Now, what does the community conservationist for the City of Columbia do?
So I'm part of the Office of Sustainability, and we work across departments, mainly on policies, programs, and projects. So things like the landscape management ordinance, before it was the weed ordinance, and you couldn't really have native plants in your yard. And so we rewrote that together.
So people couldn't have native plants in their yard?
Technically speaking, according to our old ordinance, that's how it was.
Because it looked unkept.
Exactly.
I know there were people, I remember several years ago, there was a situation where somebody had all these beautiful native plants, but it was breaking the city ordinance. Mm-hmm. So that has now changed.
It is changed, yes. And so we have a much more defined ordinance where we've defined what a managed native landscape is. So if you're controlling your invasive plants, like winter creeper, bush honeysuckle, burning bush, things like that, if you're keeping that out of your native landscape and you're promoting biodiversity, that is a managed native landscape.
Okay, let me ask you about, go back to the honeysuckle. Now there's the bush honeysuckle, which you consider invasive.
Correct.
Then there's the honeysuckle vine, which smells like heaven. Is that considered invasive also?
Depends on which one you're talking about. So there's Japanese honeysuckle, which is exotic and invasive. We also have many native honeysuckles, like our coral honeysuckle, and this is why we prefer to use scientific names, because honeysuckle is such a common name. You really don't know which species you're talking about.
So you're saying there's two different types of vine honeysuckles too?
There's several different types of vine honeysuckle.
And some of the vine honeysuckle that smells so sweet?
And it's native. There are native honeysuckles, yes.
Okay. But the bush honeysuckle, which grows like a bush because it's called bush honeysuckle, and it has the flowers, but it doesn't have that sweet smell, that's an invasive plant.
That one, yes. And there's Japanese honeysuckle, which is a vine. That is also an exotic and invasive.
So how do you tell the difference?
It's, you gotta learn.
Okay. What are you doing along the roadsides trying to protect pollinators?
So we're converting mowed turf grass into native prairie vegetation. And this is a citywide program through our Public Works Department. And we are offsetting our mowing. And so not only are we reducing our carbon emissions from mowing, but we're also putting in plants that are much more productive than turf grass. So turf grass, especially in our clay pan soils, its roots can barely penetrate those clay pan soils. So as far as like stormwater mitigation, it really doesn't do a whole lot. It doesn't do much for building carbon in the soil. Mm-hmm. Whereas native plants, which have extensive root systems, so things like your black-eyed Susans, they go 4 to 6 feet deep into the soil.
Yeah, they evolved for this kind of soil that we have.
Exactly. And so that's why they can survive drought. That's why they can survive all these harsh storms. And why they're great for preventing erosion and for mitigating stormwater. So those long roots, they create these long channels into the soil column, allowing for stormwater to infiltrate deeper into the soil column. And they're much better at sequestering carbon than turf grass because of those long roots. So plants, they bring in carbon from the atmosphere through photosynthesis. They bring it down into the roots. As they're growing and maturing, the roots, they decay, and they're bringing carbon. It's locked into the soil. So they're actually taking carbon out of the atmosphere, locking it in the soil for us. They're storing that carbon for us.
So when we are looking at flowers and trees and plants, those are the things that are giving us life on this planet.
Absolutely.
Those are the things that we need to show respect for, that we need to try to keep going. And it makes a difference between life and death.
Yeah, green infrastructure is infrastructure, and we need to value it just as much as we value our roads and our buildings.
What do you say to people who complain, and I'm sure you've had some complaints about not mowing as much?
Oh yeah, and it's understandable. I mean, we're transforming a landscape. It doesn't happen overnight, and so the whole process, we have to kill the existing vegetation, which can take 1 to 3 years, depending on what's growing there. And so in that process, things are going to be dead looking, they're going to be ratty looking. And it's the third and the fourth and the fifth year after we've seeded the native plants is when you really start to see the milkweeds and the big blooms. The prairie blazing star comes up, and you have these big cones full of purple flowers. It's a long process, and we're working on it. And we've hired a wonderful ecological services consultant to do the work, and we're starting to see some real progress. Earlier this summer, there was great blooms. We had all kinds of coreopsis, beard tongue was coming up, all the beautiful flowers I know Nadia has brought onto the show before.
Yeah, and if you just walk through the countryside, you'll see a lot of those just growing naturally. Along the road. That's the one thing. Now, I live out 30 miles north of Columbia and on Route F, and we have so many beautiful, wonderful wildflowers growing along the road. I wish MoDOT did not cut as often as they do, because then it cuts down the flowers. And those are all important pollinators for us.
Absolutely, yes. And
how do we get the word out to have enough people understand how important it is to have those native plants survive?
We talk about it, what we're doing right now. And, having a native landscape, it's a gateway into opening this whole world of ecological sciences for people. And so once you see that first monarch go into its chrysalis and watch that process, you realize just how important these things are. And so the monarch butterfly, its caterpillar, will only eat milkweed. There are many other moths and butterflies and other creatures that will rely only on one specific plant species or genus or family. And so these native plants that have existed here for thousands of years and co-evolved with these native insects, they are the life force of those insects. The insects feed the birds and everybody else, which leads directly up to us. And as you were saying before, they are our life force. And so
right, exactly. Everything serves a purpose. Every single thing serves a purpose. And many times mankind comes in and we just kind of upset the balance there and make a mess of things.
And we do, and that's why this program is so exciting. And not only are we mitigating climate change by bringing carbon into the soil, but we're also creating a more resilient environment by creating more biodiversity. So biodiversity is all the animals in an area.
Yeah.
And the more biodiversity that you have, the
better we all are.
The better off we
all right.
are. Yeah.
If you want more information on this, they can go to the City of Columbia's website, right?
como.gov/pollinator.
This is the happiest I've seen Connor looking.
Well, he loves to go walking by himself, and that's what we did.
Connor was a rescue dog. He was a puppy mill dog, wasn't he?
Yes, and you know what? I got him when he was 8 years old, and that was 4 years ago. So, which is hard for me to believe, and we've enjoyed and loved every single day. But because he's getting a little older, I thought I would talk about, as pets become more into the line of senior citizens, some things that you can do to help them. And some of those things we do for Connor, and some of those things right now he's doing beautifully and doesn't need it. But some of those things that you'll see is they start to have some problems with their joints. Sometimes even a hardwood floor is a little bit too slippery for them and difficult for them to get up as well when they have some arthritis.
So how do you make that easier?
You make it easier by sometimes you can just get an area rug and put that in a strategic position. Plus, having their toenails a little bit shorter helps. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to jumping up and down on things, which they sometimes don't do as well, you can have a step up, which for our cats, they love that. So we have a little step up, even a little stool, and they get up on that, and then they jump up to the next surface. But for a dog, sometimes they're not used to stairs, and so they don't want to climb a stair to get up on a couch that they normally would jump, and it frustrates them. So sometimes a ramp works better, and they make ramps that are easily put into your home.
I've seen those. In fact, a friend of mine has a ramp for his dog to climb up into the car.
Yes, which is perfect and such a big help, because it's difficult for them to maneuver even normally when they're young dogs to get into the cars the way they're shaped sometimes, and the ramp helps, and then as they get older it helps even more.
So what are some of the signs of a pet moving into senior years?
Well, sometimes it's just as little as they are not wanting to go out on their walk or not wanting to go as long, which I do see a little bit with Connor, but Connor has always liked to go at his own speed in his own direction, so we're mindful of that. And sometimes you'll see that they're not eating as well, or sometimes you will see that they're not seeing or maneuvering as well or hearing as well. Their senses will sometimes diminish as they get older.
And especially when you talk about not eating as well, cats can be very finicky.
Finicky, yes.
Very finicky, and as they get older, they may become a little more finicky.
Yes.
What can you do to entice that? Because it can really be frustrating if you're trying to get your cat to eat and it just kind of looks at it and walks away, say, make me happy with something else.
Exactly.
I mean, they have that attitude about them.
They do, and some doggies do too. So I think, and I call it spicing up the food, but adding just a little something to their food sometimes is all it takes, just being a little creative. Now, you want to do that by talking to your veterinarian and make sure if they need a low-fat product, that's absolutely easy to do. So just to give you some examples, my guys, I give them the 98% fat-free little cans of chicken, and what I do is just take not even a teaspoon of the chicken with some broth. You can do the same thing with tuna, with salmon, anything like that, but you can take that or even a little bit of chicken broth by itself or beef broth, but the low fat makes it very easy for them to take it at any age, a tiny little bit, and then even a little bit of warm water will bring out the flavor in the food and stir it around a little bit.
You mean with the canned food?
The canned food and the dry food. I'll take a tiny little bit with the dry food, and it still will be hard, but I'll kind of stir it around, and that attaches the flavor to each piece.
Okay, what about putting a little bit of dried garlic powder? Do cats...
You know, this is the thing. Garlic sometimes will not be good. Garlic and onion for dogs and cats.
Okay, so don't do that.
Do not do that, yes.
Okay.
And don't use salt at all either, because, so you want to minimize the salt, because as they get older, they can have some heart problems, and you don't want them retaining fluid.
Can you put a little bit of oil, vegetable oil in?
You can, but really, I find the best, if you go with the 98% fat-free on the chicken, and it's a flavor that they really love.
The broth.
The broth, or even just a little taste of the chicken, those little cans that they make of chicken, where you can take just a little piece of chicken and a little bit of broth, put that on there, stir it around. You would be amazed how far that goes in the bowl of food. And sometimes they love it.
Finicky eaters.
For a finicky eater, sometimes you do have to change the food. And I put out what I call a smorgasbord. So I'll put out several foods and let them say, hey, I really like this one. Or you can add just a little bit of food to the food that you're feeding and see, oh, they pick out that food. That's probably the food.
I've got several different...
But work with your veterinarian, because you don't want to do something that would be too rich for them.
I have several different cases of food for our older cat, Meowser, and I just alternate each day, give them a different taste.
I think as long, again, as you're talking to your veterinarian about it, for some animals, they would not like that. My guys literally on about the same food, do the same brand of food at least during their life and do very, very well, and then I spice it up. But, so some animals like change, some animals don't. So knowing your animal through every phase of their life is the best. And if you see that they are slowing down, if you see that they're not hearing you when you call, if you see that they're not seeing as well when they're walking, all of those things you can help them with and guide them and learn a new way. If they're not seeing as well, you don't want to all of a sudden start changing furniture. If they're not hearing as well, sometimes you can find a tone that they will hear, and so they will come, and also learning some hand signals with the doggies. But keep them walking and following you and doing the things that they love best with play and things that are attaching them to you. And the other thing I love as they're getting older, and even when they're younger, is massaging their joints. Massaging helps the circulation. It helps their joints. It alleviates pain. It's a fantastic thing to do. And if you need guidance on that, I'll just give you an example. One of my staff members, Priscilla, is amazing. She's taken courses in animal massage, and I'm sure other veterinarians and other places have that too, so that you can watch what she's doing and she will teach you, and it really helps and bonds you to the pet.
Mickey Havner is with us. Mickey is an end-of-life doula, and while most of us don't like to talk about dying, it is something that should be a part of our conversation, especially with our loved ones.
Exactly.
Because, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's something that we are all going to experience. There is no escaping it. None.
No, there is no way. And if people talk about it in advance, then there are a lot fewer surprises when that happens. Family members don't have to make decisions that should have already been made and should have been talked about.
Right.
So
and when you were facing the end of life, either of yourself or a family member or someone that you love, it can be frightening, but with the right preparation and discussion, it can also be an enlightening experience.
Yes, it can be a very educational experience and can open up one's life for the rest of one's life.
Exactly, because when you realize that dying is not the end of it, it's not the end of it all, it's just stepping on to the next phase of our life. That's the way I look at it.
Yes.
When the physical body dies, and decays, but I still go on to the next phase.
Right. Our spirits, I believe, are like the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
They're always here, and they don't go away.
No, they don't. And your loved ones are still there. They're waiting for you. And I also believe that our pets are waiting for us, too, across the Rainbow Bridge.
Yes.
I don't care what anybody else says. I believe our pets are waiting for us there, too. But, Mickey, you wanted to talk about, you started about a year ago, something called the Death Cafe. And it sounds morbid, but it is not at all. It's very enlightening.
Yes.
What is the Death Cafe?
The Death Cafe is, for now at least, an online experience on Zoom. And it's a place where people can come to talk about dying. They can talk about their own dying experiences they've had, what they expect, what they're afraid of. And we have no set agenda. Actually, I do the Death Cafe with Rosie Greer and Terry Wilson, who are also death doulas.
Do you remember, or have you've heard of, I'm sure, Dr. Raymond Moody?
Yes.
He wrote a book many years ago about people who had had near-death experiences, where they had left their body, they had gone through a dark tunnel to see a light at the end of the tunnel, and then they were told it was not their time, or they were given a choice if they wanted to go on or go back. Have you had any discussions about this for people who've actually had that experience?
We have. A lot of times when people show up for Death Cafe, that's one of the things they tell us is about their near-death experience, or maybe about an experience they've had with a loved one coming back and contacting them somehow after they've gone through this physical death. And these kind of stories bring hope for people who are afraid of dying, for people who are accompanying their loved one on that journey. And it's important that we talk about it.
And you talk to nurses, and when my mother was dying, wonderful nurses told me some beautiful stories that were of comfort.
Yes.
That people had experienced as they were dying. If you want more information, it's heartlanddeathdoulas@gmail.com. You can send, you can email, or the next Death Cafe is October the 22nd, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., right?
Yes.
We have two talented, wonderful musicians with us today, Kurt and Maria Trevor. And they're going to share some beautiful music, but we want to talk about, just a little bit about a new endeavor you're starting, Missouri Academy of Music.
Right.
What is that, Kurt?
Paul, it's a new project that Maria and I have started for young string players in the mid-Missouri area. Talented young string players who want to play in a large ensemble and a small ensemble, meaning a string quartet. So we have hopefully the brightest and the best young string players in our area. We started 3 weeks ago. We have almost 40 young players. We still are open to take new players into the orchestra. But it's a very special program where they can be in a string quartet or they can be in a string orchestra. Unfortunately, we don't have wind players, but it's a string program, very special.
Yeah, and of course, you know, Kirk was the conductor of the Missouri Symphony Orchestra for 21 years. 21 years. And this is a new chapter in your life.
Absolutely.
And then Maria, your part in this is what?
Yes, I'm also a co-director of this new program, and Kirk and I wanted to see how we could make this program unique and different. And we have established that we want to continue working here in our community and making music still part of our community. So we want to engage these young players in serving, in civic service. I have been doing harp and healing for the last 11 years here in town, and that brings music to people who really need it.
Right.
And we want to introduce our young players to something like this, bringing music in small groups, trios or quartets, to people who cannot come to concerts in regular concert setting.
Yeah.
So that means taking a string quartet to assisted living, for example, or people with intellectual or physical disabilities, and playing for them.
Right.
If it's only 10 minutes or so, it will be very special for them. And because music is the language of emotions. You can communicate non-verbally.
And what you have for us today is absolutely beautiful. We'll get phone number, how people can get in touch with you, but I want you to play right now. And this is what?
The Swan by Saint-Saëns.
Okay, The Swan. Stop what you're doing. It's just gorgeous. Kirk and Maria. the Swan. I want you to do one more real quick, and we'll go out with your music. But if people want more information, how can they get in touch with you, Maria?
They should go to our website. It's www.missouriacademyofmusic.com.
Okay, www.missouriacademyofmusic.com. Okay.
Yep.
Kirk and Maria, Trevor, I thank you so much for coming by today.
Thank you, Paul.
You're going to just go into the break with this tune, and this is one that we will all recognize also.
I hope so.
It's called
Beauty and the Beast.
Okay, have yourself a nice day. Here's Kirk and Maria with Beauty and the Beast.